Guys. All right, we have a great interview with the one, the only Hacksmith. This is a great interview about peptides. We literally talked about everything. Before you continue, though, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. And when it's over, leave a like, leave a comment, show Hacky some love. Don't forget to buy his brand new book, which is linked down in the description. It's an awesome book. You got to get it today. It's called The Complete Guide to Peptides, Unlocking the Secrets to Healing, Health, and Longevity. So definitely check it out. It's worth getting. It's probably the best peptide book on the market right now. Here we go. All right, so guys, I'm here with the one and only Hacksmith. We're going to talk about peptides today. Thanks for joining me, Hacky.
Yeah, thanks for having me after, I think, 5 attempts of trying to do this.
Two attempts. You won and me won, so we're even.
We're even now.
Yeah. So tell me about your fashion choice today.
So these are little sleepies, and I looks like I've influenced you into them as well. These are just pajamas that they actually make for kids, and I think they're made out of like bamboo. So comfy. But it's crazy actually for anybody with kids. Our kids have worn the same ones for like 6 months past when they're supposed to be worn, and they're super awesome. They fit like through all kinds of growth and fluctuations because of how stretchy the material is.
Yep.
So yeah, we have matching family ones. Luckily for me, I can pretty much wear the same one, and we just upsize every year or so for our kids.
That's amazing. Yeah, I got them just cuz, and I did not realize they weren't a set, so I only ordered the tops. I got the bottoms coming. I'll probably have them on for the next month while I'm recovering from my knee surgery. But I do think we should contact the company and suggest that they make animal pet. We need them for the pets.
We need some pets.
We need some pets. It would be amazing. Seriously, it would be so amazing. They would make so much money. Oh my gosh. And I think the animals would like how soft and comfortable they are too. So
yes.
All right. So even normally I interview people about GLP-1s, but we will get into that. But why don't you just tell me your story and how you got involved in peptides, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So really to kind of get into my story and my journey with this, I got to go back to the history of kind of the background that led me to it. So throughout college, I played rugby. I competed in powerlifting. So I would go to powerlifting nationals, compete there. We were, for a long time, we were second in the nation in rugby as well. So very competitive in those sports. And obviously those kind of take a toll on the body. And then I ended up going into the military. And while I was in the military, I was with the Rangers. So I completed the Army's Ranger School. I went through selection for the 75th Ranger Regiment, spent some time there, and jumped out of airplanes. And all of that stuff is going to take quite the toll on the body. And so, as I was getting to the time where I was getting out of the military, I started getting plagued with injuries. And, peptides weren't something that were unfamiliar to me because I had seen a lot of people talking about BPC 157 or, different peptides throughout the time of just being into the fitness world. And then as I was getting out of the military, it was just, I was fighting injury to injury to injury. And so that resulted in me gaining a lot of weight because I couldn't exercise. And if I couldn't exercise because it hurt so bad, why would I worry about what I eat? And so it was like this revolving cycle that was everything feeding each other. Really, I'm making excuses for why I didn't, but it was hard to push through the pain with a lot of the injuries. Sure. And, I got kids now, and I want to be like a present dad in their lives. And I want to be able to throw a football with them and throw a baseball in the backyard. And I was like, you know what? I need to commit to peptides. I need to try it out and see if this is something that can help heal the injuries and stuff that I have. And so I started with BPC 157. And then all of a sudden, for the first time, my shoulder didn't hurt. I mean, It was so bad. I have a slap tear and arthritis in my left shoulder. That's the only thing I've ever had an MRI or any diagnosis on, like in terms of what's actually in there. And it was so bad where you lean on the edge of the bath when you're giving a kid a bath, right? You lean on the edge of the tub. And after bath time, I would stand up and could not move my left shoulder.
Wow.
It hurt so bad. And it was just like, it was horrible. And I mean, literally BPC is the first thing where I'm like, okay, I don't have just this horrible pain constantly in my joints and my body. And then that led me to just everything else of doing more research and spending more time. And so, of course, started on GLP. And as of today, I'm down like 38 pounds since November 1st. And today is February 5th. So 3 months.
Nice.
And yeah, and then I kind of started getting into this just to tell people about what peptides are and what they do. That was my sole intent, was to just talk about the things. And I didn't even know, the first time I saw anybody talking about it on TikTok or anything was, at least in the sense of like the community that exists now, was Mike on a health mission, Brian
Okay.
rants about stuff, and somebody else, right? And they let me up into their live. This was like day one of me having a TikTok. And we just talked. And then from there, I just kept like meeting new people and talking to more people. So yeah, it was kind of interesting that I literally started it just to talk to people and tell people about peptides.
Nice. Yeah, I remember running across you. I think you come off very personable. You answer questions. You're not on there just being like, "Hey, go buy peptides." You know what I mean? I really appreciated that about you, and you seem to be able to pretty much answer, everyone's questions, which is amazing. I don't know what you've done, like if you've built your own database, whatever you've done, Hacky, I want it. I'm joking around, but seriously. And wait, now let me lead into this. I mean, I'm totally getting ahead of myself, but it doesn't really matter. Aren't you writing a book?
Yes.
So yeah, what's the deal?
That is the biggest topic of discussion. I feel like every time I am online, somebody's asking me when the book's coming out. And it's a very, very tough balance for me, because I want to be able to spend the time talking to people and answering questions. But I also know that by finishing this book, it will also help people, probably more so than just the little bit of time that I'm online and helping people out. So the way that I decided to build this book was I've looked at some of the other ones that are out there, and I've never thought they were comprehensive enough.
I agree. Yep.
They don't include it. Maybe I think the most that I counted was 30 different peptides in one book.
Yep.
And so what I wanted to do was to highlight peptides, but also highlight the bioregulators, which have a lot of the effects on organs.
Yeah.
So I think the current number in my book is like 82.
Okay.
Different ones right now. And what I wanted to do was give an introduction to what these things are, talk a little bit about, some things about how to reconstitute to where people can understand that, or how to calculate dosages, or how to store them properly. Just really every little piece of information or question that you could ask.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to talk about as many different things as I could. And by the time it gets published, there's probably going to be something else out. That's just how it goes.
Do a second edition and a third.
Yeah, I'm going to have 17 editions in 4 years by the time, know. But yeah, so what I have in there is the origin, kind of what it is, where it comes from, the mechanism of action, right? The effects of that, and then typical dosages, safety considerations. And then I also include in there too, just a couple phrases that you could search online if you wanted to do more research, right? Okay. Hey, well, what else about BPC 157 could I search, or could I read about to understand where this comes from? And then, there's some more things that I talk about, different things about using them for specific health purposes, or even giving profiles of, like, maybe I described Kelly, and this is what Kelly's trying to accomplish currently in life, and give a description of that person, and then what types of things they may do for that, just to make it relatable and understandable for as many people as possible, to where you as an absolute beginner could have value, or as an expert have value.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I'm excited about that because I have at least 4 peptide books. There's one, I can't remember the name, that was probably a little, they might have had even more than 30. I'll find it and let you know, but it still didn't go that in depth about each one. I didn't find one that was like just this full, comprehensive. So that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, I do think as an example, like I know with BPC 157, usually it's like 250 micrograms once or twice a day. Um, I got into it, as you know, I'll tell that story. Dr. Vickery, who I've interviewed on my channel like 3 times, um, my last interview, I mentioned to him that I was going to be having knee surgery, and he's like, "You really need to get on BPC and TB 500." So after our interview, we talked about it, and he was like 1 milligram a day, 2 weeks prior to surgery, and 750 TB 500, which is more than you'd normally do, and that was like
Mhm.
daily. But I'm like, "All right, let's go." And he's an MD, not he's a full MD, and
Right.
he told me where he got his, and so that's where I got them, and they weren't cheap, but I did it, and I was out of physical therapy in like 4.5 weeks.
Yeah.
I had nothing to compare it to, but I honestly feel it helped. So I'm doing it again for this surgery. And I think, I think that's a good example of, normally you would take it like this, but if you're going to have a major trauma done to your knee and you've got bones and ligaments and tendons and, you can safely probably take more for a short period of time
Yeah.
and do even better.
Um,
What are your thoughts on that?
no, actually, I listened to a Huberman podcast, and I think he was interviewing Dr. Conover. And he was actually talking about, and I might don't catch me with a misquote here.
Don't quote. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I got you.
but I think what he said was 5 milligrams a day of BPC 157 was something that he had seen used or
Okay.
had somebody use or something along those lines with no negative side effects, no major
Okay.
issues. And so that's one thing too that's tough to capture when you talk about dosages or what works. And I think the biggest thing to look at, one thing I like about Dr. Seeds is that in certain scenarios, they'll say that this is the maximum really effective dose or the saturation dose of something, where if you take more than that, it's like a waste, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like a multivitamin, right? You take too
Unless
much
you
and you just
spread it out maybe in the day, like with BPC, I know you can do like morning,
yeah,
night.
yeah. But I mean, there's certain things that you just have to evaluate the safety profile, how the
Yeah.
thing works, and then figure out, does it stop working after a certain point or does it work more effectively? To really understand that. But that's the hard thing of the nuances of, for example, the GLPs.
Yeah.
Could somebody lose weight, even though the starting dose of tirzepatide is 2.5? Could somebody realistically lose weight at 1 milligram per week?
Yeah. I know someone that did, it was funny. They got their meds from Empower. They read the script wrong. And for 17 weeks, they did 1.25 and they lost weight.
Yeah. And so
So
it's you can never explain that nuance to people of like, well, it's not, Tylenol, you're supposed to take 2. I take
I
1.
always start with one. Yeah.
Right. And so you can never really explain that piece. And I think that's a difficult thing about this entire world of
Yeah.
peptides, of GLPs, is being able to understand that it's like there's nothing that's really truly black and white. I mean,
Right.
there is, but there's also not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a spectrum. I think, and the thing with like BPC is it's like with my niece, I don't know if doing more would have helped more or not, because when you're in the throes of recovery, you don't know how much it's actually helping. You
Hmm.
just know it probably is. So it's like, do I try a little bit more this time or do I just stick with but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. So, I know within the peptide arena, you have peptides for muscle growth or at least muscle support, weight loss, cognitive, anti-aging, immune support. What are those main categories of just with peptides? I'd love to go into bioregulators too. I don't know that much about them, but
I would say, well, we can classify bioregulators in, just
yeah.
because this is how I'm going to answer that piece. Organ, right? A lot of different organs. And so maybe those things can really. Did this put a thumbs up on my screen because I put a thumbs up?
Did it didn't do it for me, but it did it for you.
I don't know how we created that, but that's interesting.
That's hilarious. Okay.
All right. So organs, right? There's things for, I guess, what you would classify this category as is muscle building,
Okay.
weight loss, anti-aging, um, injury recovery and prevention. I would say that probably captures them all.
What about immune support and stuff like
Immune
that?
support, yeah,
Okay.
classifying one as immune support. I try to think of what I've already listed and not relist them
Cognitive,
again. But I
cognitive
would say that, and some of these things can fall under, like, would
crossover. Yeah.
anti-aging and longevity be technically immune support?
Yeah.
But I mean,
Well, and
there's,
like weight loss and muscle sometimes cross over with certain
yeah, health.
GLPs and
Just make one overarching category of health.
all of them.
Yeah.
All of them. Okay. And then what can, because I know a lot of, from what I've read, a lot of the really good bioregulators come out of, correct me if I'm wrong, come out of Russia, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, not, I don't care. It's not, I mean, we get things from China too, whatever. I mean, it's like, so tell me what they are, how they work, how they're different, because they're not actually peptides, right? Like, what are they? How do they help?
Well, the bioregulators are peptides,
They are. Okay.
but they're just called bioregulator peptides.
Okay.
And there's a documentary that's really interesting to watch about kind of how this started. And people don't realize that since like the 60s and 70s, they've started researching these things.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of history and data that exists around the bioregulators, but just not in the US.
Okay.
And so essentially what they realized, a lot of this stemmed from the Cold War. And people on submarines, and they had to be able to make sure that they were able to be healthy because they were noticing issues from them that were staying under for a long period of time, and different things like that. Chernobyl, right? They had experience with
Mm-hmm.
peptides and bioregulators in Chernobyl. And so basically what Russia does, and we've seen this through the Olympics as well, right? They have tried to focus on human performance as a whole. There are
Okay.
literally institutions that are there that are solely committed to just human health and performance, different than how it is in the US, right? Like, it seems to me like their reasoning behind it is to truly make things better as
Yeah.
opposed to make a profit off of treating or doing things like that.
Yeah.
So essentially what they've done, and the documentary breaks it down, but in the simplest form, they identified something that has a function. A lot of times it's found in animals. Pretty much all of it is found through animals. And they said, how does that work? How does that function? And how can we mimic and recreate those effects? And so they've basically figured out how to extract those or make them synthetically, or whatever method that they use for it, that has an effect on different organ functions. So for example, thymolin is going to stimulate the thymus gland, similar to how a growth hormone secretagogue stimulates the pituitary gland,
Mm-hmm.
to increase T cell production and all these other things to help boost your immune function. And there's ones for heart, and there's ones for liver, and there's ones for literally everything. And I think the cool thing about bioregulators is that they can be used to treat as well as prevent through kind of the continual optimization of the health of specific organs. So it's pretty cool because, I don't think anybody takes a GLP to prevent weight gain. They typically take it once they've gained, right, to lose. But the
Right.
bioregulators are used more so as a preventative to a problem that you're trying to solve, and can potentially help aid in longevity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think those are really cool because it's something that really nobody talks about. And I made one about xenoleutin, a video about xenoleutin.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, this is for the ladies out there. I'm just a guy, right? I'm just trying to help everybody understand, right? I'm like, hey, there's one that can help with regulating your ovarian function. And people
Yeah.
are like, this is so crazy. I didn't know about this. And it's just like, there's just so much that exists that people just don't know and understand because it's not out there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm learning. I mean, this is going off track, but I was interviewing Dr. Vickery yesterday, and he's he's all over, meaning the whole approach: nutrients, peptides, hormones, getting everything regulated and functioning properly. And then your body starts healing itself, basically. And two of his big ones are nitric oxide and glutathione. I'm probably saying that wrong. I don't know. But yeah, so he swears that there's a chemist. I can't think of his name right now. This is not a promotion. I don't make anything off this, but they do transdermal. And he said it's actually better than the injections. So I'll be starting this soon.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what he was saying in the interview. He went into the chemistry behind it all and then how you get your nitric oxide and your glutathione levels good, things start working better, on top of everything else. So I'm
Yeah.
just excited to see where all of that goes.
Well, I think you kind of made a good point there, though, with nutrition or all these other things. The most important thing with any of this, and I think sometimes it goes hand in hand, right? You should exercise to maintain your health. Well, if you're too heavy, it might be very hard for you to exercise, so you need to lose. So they kind of go hand in hand, but I think at the end of the day, you need to eat healthy, or at least right? You
Yeah.
need to get yourself all of the nutrients that you can.
Yep.
And you need to move your body, and you need to make sure your sleep's right. You need to make sure that everything is optimized, because a peptide is never going to solve a problem by itself.
Right.
You have to help it solve
Yep.
those problems.
No, it's true. I mean, it's a whole, and as you know, the big thing is when I'm 70, 80, 90, if I live that long, I want to be mentally there. I want to be physically there. Like, I tell people lift weights into your 90s. Like
Yeah.
we're losing muscle as we age just by aging. And do yoga, get your balance and flexibility, whatever you have to do. And I've always known this, but because of some of the health issues I struggled with, it's impossible to even think about working out when I couldn't stop thinking about food. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So but now that I'm there, it's like, yes, now I need to take these steps to really optimize myself as much as possible and get as healthy as I can without and still enjoying life, still having a glass
Yeah.
of wine, whatever it is you want to do. But I think you can have your cake and eat it too. I really do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think too, like I've seen, I've had family members that have gone through, just had bad health towards the end of their life.
Yeah.
I just want to not wake up one day.
Exactly.
That's where I want to go.
I want to die
go
in my
sleep.
sleep, please.
I don't
That's
want to
it.
be in the doctors. I don't want to be in and out, like dealing with that. I want to be as healthy as possible. And then one day something in my body just says, you know what? That's it for us.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My biggest motivation is always, I don't have kids now. Right now, I'm not dating, whatever. Maybe I'll, that'll be down the road. But the point is, I'm it. Like I have to make sure I'm healthy into my old age, because I don't know if anyone will be there to have my back. It's a big
Yeah.
deal. But why wouldn't you want it anyway? But the point is, that's even more of a motivator, that I
Right.
want to be able to take care of myself when I'm old and not have to necessarily rely on someone. I mean, unless you get in an accident or something like that. But
Right.
knock on wood, let's hope that doesn't happen. So I am curious about one thing with peptides. So I've heard mixed things on this. I'm sure there's some peptides maybe that don't work nicely together, but beyond that, I've heard one theory of just focus on one area at a time, maybe two. You don't have to take 20 peptides at once.
Yeah.
And then I've heard the other where it's just like, go for it, as long as you know what you're doing and you're taking it for a good, whatever. So what do you think about that?
So in my opinion, I both, kind of both, right? I would say that you don't need to take a bunch of different things. And I tell people this a lot too. They're like, well, I'm starting terzepatide next week, or I'm starting, some whatever they're starting next week. But I also don't want to lose too much muscle. And so you think I should take like some Orlin too? And I also like want to feel more energy. So you think I should take NAD or MOT-C? And I also want my skin to look better. And I'm like, all right, hang on a second here, right? We're overweight. We're trying to lose weight. We might feel energy just from that, right? Now
Yeah.
we are healthier in general. We might have that energy. You don't even know how much muscle you're going to lose. And so I think that there's a balance of identifying. Yeah. Now, one thing that makes sense to, maybe start off by stacking together was in my situation with a really, really bad shoulder. All right, I've gained weight because of injuries. I also want to aid in losing that weight. Let me start maybe BPC and a GLP, right, at the same time. Or maybe offset by a couple of weeks, because the other piece of it too is if you start things at the same time, you have no idea what you might have an adverse reaction to.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a balance of, yes, taking a few different things at one time, may be okay, but also not taking more than is needed or allowing the time for certain things to be revealed. So I kind of think that my stance is both of those ways can be effective. can be
Yeah.
successful, but there has to be a balance and an understanding of, like, people will literally start taking a GLP and immediately want to take AOD with it, where it's
Yeah.
like, what if you lost 5 pounds a week for the first 20 weeks? Then bring in AOD once you get stuck, which would be an insane rate, right? We don't want to
Yeah.
lose
Yeah.
5 pounds a
Yeah.
week
We
for
don't
20
lose that
weeks.
much. Unless you're like
Um,
500 pounds, it can happen then,
yeah.
healthy.
But, giving things a little bit of time to kind of take action, see how your body responds, and see then, now that you've optimized and fixed another process, what happens next? What
Yeah.
do you need to fix next?
Yeah. Well, and plus, so as we know, with most, I mean, not GLPs, but I think it's a thing I want to do. We cycle on and off. So it's like, okay, if you're going to do some Orlin for 8 weeks, come off that, then maybe do something else for 8 weeks. I think for me, it's like, okay, what if something gives you side effects and you're doing 5 things? You don't, you don't
Yeah,
even know. Like I
exactly.
had an allergic reaction to, I think, TB500, TB4, and I still think I do if I do it too much. So now I've gotten the fragment and I'm trying that to see if that'll help. But if I had been doing too many things, it still took some deduction to figure out that that was potentially what was causing it. Didn't
Right.
happen till after a month, but I was taking a pretty high amount. So from what I read, it can build up, it affects your immune system, I believe. That's what I read, TB500. So it can cause like a, what do you call it? Like where it puts your immune system into overdrive and then you have
Yeah.
a
Right.
histamine
Right.
reaction. So I got an EpiPen to be safe, which I think smart. I mean, if you're taking
Yeah.
anything like that, you can get them usually with your insurance for like $10 and then you have something on hand if something happened. But um so that's kind of my thinking now. Initially I was like, I'm gonna try a bunch of stuff, but I'm about to have surgery. I'm like, I'm gonna back off, minimize it, stick to my TB, got my terzepatide, and then once I come off of that, then maybe I'll, start up some Orlin again or Tessa or something like that. So
Yeah. And another thing is like how long term or acute does something have effects? Like something like Semax, if you use that, you would feel the effects basically for the day, for a few hours, for a certain amount of time, right? It's not going to be like something that has to be taken long term. And so
right,
potentially Semax could be stacked into basically anything to help with.
absolutely.
I got a test coming up.
Or like Dissa, for sleep
Right.
or
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think there's certain things that, depending on how much of a response is triggering in your body or how much it's doing, could be
yeah,
balanced to add in basically no matter what else was added, of course, to an extent.
yeah.
But yeah,
So Cemex and what's the other one? Cemex and there's
Solank.
another. Yeah, what I haven't tried either. I'd like to. I know anxiety is one thing, but what are the benefits of those two?
So the overarching, like the biggest piece of them that I think separates the two of them is Solank is going to help with anxiety, depression, things like that. Where
Okay.
Simax is going to help a lot more with the cognitive, like focus, ADHD,
Okay.
those types of
If you
things.
want to get something done one day, you could actually just take that day and potentially see effects for the day.
Yeah, and typically
Okay,
people
that's
have to
amazing.
dose it a couple times a day
Okay.
because it's not a super long lasting
Okay.
peptide. Now, the absolute best of all of the cognitive peptides, in my opinion, is cerebrolysin, which is a bioregulator.
Cerebral lysin.
Cerebrolysin. It
Okay.
is a peptide bioregulator that's derived from the pig's brain,
Okay.
and it is an intramuscular injection. But that
Oh
can be
wow. Okay.
taken. Yeah, so it's a little more daunting, right?
Oh,
But
I do. I do the. Yeah. I mean, I
there,
don't mind, but yeah, it's a.
yeah. But so with
But
cerebrolysin, it's
doesn't it let
actually
it last longer because it's in the muscle, so it's releasing slower? Is that the idea?
it'll yeah, it'll last longer than like a quick use of a Simax. But
Okay.
what this is done, and there's different treatment protocols for it, but it's used for TBIs, recovery from TBIs,
Wow.
Alzheimer's,
Okay.
stroke recovery,
Oh,
um, general cognitive function. I mean, it's got a lot of different uses. And if you go on Cosmic Nootropics website, there are like 40 different research articles on the uses and effects of cerebrolysin.
wow.
And so, I mean, to me, that one's really the best. It's studied. It can be used for like ADHD. It can be used for Alzheimer's
Really?
patients, dementia. I mean, so many different uses for it. So I would say that one's the goat, right?
Okay. All right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I'm. I want to try that at some point.
yeah.
I want to try it all, Haggy.
Right.
Um,
Oh,
I'm just going to ask you about a few because I am curious. There's one it's like pinalion, or it kind of reminds me of the pineal gland, how it's spelled. Do you know what PIN? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What is it? Do you know?
That one I'm blanking on off the top of my head on what it does. You're right about the pineal gland, but I don't remember the exact mechanism or how that one functions off the top, because that's not one that anybody ever asked about, to be completely honest with
I
you.
heard it can help with sleep, but let's ask ChatGPT. It's a bioregulator peptide
Well, let's check
derived,
my book too.
yeah, from the check your book but it is a bioregulator, and
Yes.
cognitive support, neuroprotective, sleep regulation. I had anti-aging, mood, and stress. So oral or injection, cycle 10 to 20 days. May combine with other, or you can combine it with like epitalon. Am I saying it wrong?
Epitalon.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay, I didn't know
Yeah.
what you might have known. And then what's Snap? Snap 8?
So Snap 8, they refer to that as the what's the name they use for it? Basically like the safer alternatives Botox or something like that is what they call Snap 8.
Interesting. Okay.
That one you should never take subcutaneously or injectable.
Really?
Find somebody that has and ask them how they liked it. You think like GHK burns or something like that. Some of the other ones,
Oh,
they are like, it was unbearable how much
oh,
Snap 8
wow.
burned.
So why, if someone happens to get it and then they listen to this interview, can they convert it into something else, or are you
Yeah.
just screwed?
Yeah, no, a lot of people will use it. They'll still reconstitute that and they'll take it and put it in some type of topical serum, or like Scientific
Okay.
sells it in a powder form that can be used in a serum. And so
Okay.
people will typically turn those into some type of topical.
Good to know. I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
glad I
try it
know.
one time and see.
No, let's not. Let's not. I mean, I do glow with BPC, lots of backwater and TB, and it still hurts for like 8 hours, but it's not bad, but it's
Yeah,
like,
people say it's
it's annoying.
unbearable.
I don't want unbearable. No,
Yeah.
no. Wow, that's really interesting. All right, let me
Yeah.
scroll up here and see. So, what do you see if you were psychic? Um, what do you see? I mean, I think we're going to have some, especially with AI now and stuff, we're going to have some interesting things happen. But what do you see happening in the next like 5 to 10 years within peptide therapies? If
Well,
especially if they became more accessible. But
yeah. I mean, it is almost impossible to keep up with the rate at which things are coming out now. And so I think that what's really going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years is there's two things. One, it's either going to change how it's regulated, and it's going to become very accessible. I do think that there are certain things that should be less accessible depending on the
prescription or
prescription or something, right? There's some type of
yeah.
system, but here's the other piece of it too. If you put it, so I can go walk into GNC right now and I can buy something that if I take too much is going to unalive me, right? I could take 15 scoops of pre-workout, and what do you think is going to happen to me? Right? My heart's probably going to stop.
Right.
I can do a lot of different things, and BPC 157, I can take a whole vial of it and completely mess up what I'm doing and walk away okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that they need to be just usable, right? But it's use at your own risk, right? Disclaimer: not evaluated by the FDA, whatever it is, like vitamins, like any type of supplement. And so I think there's a way it can go, or there's going to be a push to, and I don't think there's a way that this can be done successfully, but now they're going to be all available to be prescribed in some capacity, which makes it very miserable, because then it just becomes a bunch of complicated
process. And they'll be too expensive, and insurance, it's just, that'll be crazy. Hopefully.
But I do think that it's going to continue to grow. And here's the thing that I always talk to people about, and this is the coolest thing is I honestly didn't at first. I literally would get like, nobody would engage with my posts, nobody would look at my stuff, and I was like, there's no hope for me, right? I'm talking about stuff that nobody cares about, but I didn't realize how much it was growing within the GLP communities or hormone replacement communities or any of these other ones. And so what I realized is that people have started taking the GLPs, really is what has fueled it. GLPs and hormone replacement therapies are what have fueled people's desire to try and learn about peptides.
Yeah.
And so as that continues to grow, right, I call people the purists. You
Yeah.
have the brand name purists and you have the compound purists and the people that only think that those things are the, the way to go, right? And they realize that there are peptides that come along with those. And then they kind of expand where their thoughts are or where their opinions are. And so it's just kind of grown people's understanding of what exists. And so they say, well, a GLP was kind of my introduction, right? They started on brand name, they had to switch to compound, and then next thing you know, the compounding pharmacy offered Samoralin, and they're like, well, what's Samoralin, right? And where before they never thought they would ever be asking a question about a peptide, their mind has opened up because they've seen the benefits of them. That's really what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and nothing wrong with people that want to use brand name or compound or wherever it is, right? But just the process of how it's changed people's perceptions by having benefits of them and seeing what peptides can do. And so then they say, well, I also want to build muscle, or I also want to have more energy, or I also want to get rid of brain fog. And next thing you know, they've asked questions and started learning about peptides. And I think that so many people's journeys have started with brand name or compound GLPs and evolved from there.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's a good one. What you catch a cold, you get COVID, the flu. There's got to be a peptide.
I would take Thymolin all day.
Okay.
So like I have a buddy who, when he gets sick, will take 10 milligrams a day for 10 days of Thymolin, and you're over it in a couple days.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there are people that have basically been able to get through long COVID symptoms, a lot of different things by taking Thymolin. And I mean, that one's just a very, very well tolerated. And you got to think that it's hard for your body to respond as you get sick because your body's in a somewhat weakened state. And so that basically triggers your thymus gland to go into overdrive and say, hey, let's go, let's get through it. And I mean, I feel like if I ever start feeling something come on, it's gone very quickly.
Yeah.
Unless I make a fire in my fireplace and then I lose my voice.
I was a big proponent of oregano oil, which I would still take if I caught something because it's just amazing. But no, I think that's amazing. I think that's one I don't have, so I'm gonna have to look into that. But the other one, I was telling you about the glutathione. Same deal. Dr. Vickery got like I would probably take both. He got COVID, and he said if you get sick, you just start taking like twice a day instead of once a day or whatever, and it knocks it out. So I imagine the combo would probably be fabulous.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so we know about the book. I'm just kind of looking over my questions here. Totally unprepared. We kind of know about injury recovery. What would be your favorite anti-aging longevity peptides?
I would say like the Glow Stack would be good just because it's going to help with inflammation. It's going to help with skin elasticity and reducing wrinkles, stuff like that. And then the growth hormone secretagogues. Some combination of those or one or the other. I think those are going to be the most effective. So you got for the growth hormone secretagogues, I'll go into detail on these two because people like that ask. We should change it from growth hormone secretagogues to the Morlins.
I call them the Morlins. I'm like all the Morlins. Yeah.
The Morlins. You got Samoralin, Tesamoralin, Ipamoralin, CJC1295, Ibutamorin.
CJ Morlin. Okay, got
CJ Morlin. And then ibutamorin is is MK677, which they should name ibutamoralin to make it all consistent, right?
Yeah.
Hexarelin. But you have things that stimulate the pituitary gland to secrete more growth hormone. That's essentially what those are doing. And growth hormone is very, very common just in the anti-aging discussions. And then the Glow protocol. And when people ask me in the simplest form of what is it, it is a look good, feel good stack. So the GHKCU is going to help with skin elasticity, helping with wrinkles and fine lines, and actually the skin complexion. And it's going to help with inflammation. The BPC 157 is going to also help with inflammation, help recover from injuries, and TB, we'll just say, is going to do about the same thing. And so you're combining those to just like as you get older, and I'm 30 now, I feel it. I think I feel it to like
Youngin,
26 though, but
such a
uh,
youngin.
but like, I mean, you wake up in the morning and you bend down to tie your shoe and your back's out for 2 weeks, and you're like, golly. So I think that's the key thing to add in is kind of the inflammation reduction and the pain relief in terms of
Yeah,
when we talk about anti-aging.
yeah. So with and with GHK, similar. Don't do that one by itself. You will regret
It
those
burns.
you will regret those life choices.
Yeah.
Um, what's the benefit of the SS31 MOTS protocol?
Yeah.
What's that doing for you?
So SS31 is really going in and helping repair the mitochondrial function in the simplest terms. And so when you think about MOTS-C, what does it do? Or even looking at things like methylene blue too, right? Methylene blue is
Hmm.
supposed to help with mitochondrial function. Well, if your mitochondria is damaged, right,
How would you
how
know?
can you really make it function to its full capacity?
Yeah,
And so by bringing in SS31 prior to using MOTS-C, what people notice is that they're helping repair the function of the mitochondria prior to optimizing the function of the mitochondria. And so to me, it makes sense, right? And SS31 is a pretty short protocol. It's not, it's a few weeks max.
hmm,
And so by running that and then turning around and running MOTS-C, I think anybody who's interested in MOTS-C should probably just look at that anyways. And it's something too that was interesting is that Jay Campbell was doing a Mind Pump interview on that podcast, and one of the things he said is like some people don't get any benefits from certain things like NAD or MOTS-C. Maybe their mitochondria was damaged too much to really get the benefits from it, right? And so I just think that you wouldn't have a broken arm and say, let me go in the gym to get it stronger until it's healed,
right.
right? Same type of concept by bringing in the SS31 prior to MOTS-C.
So how would you know? Like what symptoms would someone have to know if they had damage? Or do you?
I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to tell 100% do you have damage in the mitochondria. But, being fatigued, um, I just think having, putting a lot of stress on the body because
Yeah,
I mean the SS31 helps with oxidative stress, helps with the mitochondrial function. I think it's just one of those things where I would say that most people have probably caused damage to the function at some point.
right.
And it would be safe to assume that they could benefit from repairing
Yeah.
uh, their mitochondrial function. So I don't know what necessarily exact ways that you could test it. But by just kind of gauging that, and if you're 30 plus, you probably could
You
benefit.
probably have it. Well, it's funny. I just looked it up. Apparently, there are like biomarkers you can look, like your creatine levels, your oxidative stress markers, CoQ10 levels. Um, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then there's supplements too that you can compare. Yeah, I've always taken CoQ10, L-carnitine is good. Creatine, I tell everyone, unless you have a bad kidney, you should be taking it every day.
Yeah.
Every
I love
day.
it. And what's interesting is I started taking creatine when I was young. Um, like I would work out when I was in like high school, with my dad, and he would take creatine. And so I started taking creatine again after I had not worked out for a couple of years due to the injuries and everything like that. And I gained like 3 pounds,
Yeah.
like within a couple. And I was like, okay, I never knew truly if creatine worked. Now I do.
Yeah. Do you think that was muscle, or you think you were retaining fluid initially, or?
Yeah, I mean, so what creatine does is it just drives basically hydration into
So
the
you're
muscle.
retaining in your muscles. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fluid's going into your muscle.
yeah. And so it was definitely fluid, but like, and I was on a GLP at the time too. And of course I was like, oh gosh, um, I've ruined my weight loss progress. But it went back away very, very quickly, right? It just kind of levelized itself out, and I was continuing down on the downward trend.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then what about humanin? That's another one for mitochondrial, right? What's that one do?
That one is one that nobody ever talks about, to be completely honest with you. So I included in my book, but yeah, it's derived from the mitochondria, and basically helps protect the mitochondria from oxidative stress and stuff like that. So that's one though that is not easily found. It's not easily
Yeah.
accessible. There's not a lot of information about it, but it is a peptide that exists. But it's not something that's really been, at least from what I've seen online, that's really like widespread.
Yeah.
Which a lot of peptides aren't, right? SS31,
Yeah.
you don't see very frequently. You don't see Herceptin. You don't see, what are some of the other ones? Hexarelin.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think at some point, it's kind of funny. If like in music, you know how there was an album that came out like 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden one of the songs from that album is like the top song in the US right now, and you're like, wait, that was from that Post Malone album? Have you ever
Right.
noticed that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, man, that song was from an old album, and now it's finally catching waves. I think kind of the same way with peptides, right?
Yeah.
I just had made a video about Mazdutide, and that has been in my book since I started writing my book, right? It wasn't something
Okay.
that I saw and added in there, and people are all talking about Mazdutide now, like it's this new thing that is never been heard of. And it's kind of where like these things exist, but it takes time sometimes for certain things to come out and be, if one of the telehealth companies brings in, we'll just say Mazdutide, then everybody's going to start asking that question.
Yeah. Right.
So,
So I have one, we were talking about the Morlins. Why would someone decide to do one over the other? Because you've got Morlin, then you have the CJ IPA, then you have Tessa. You can also do IPA with that. Like, why would you decide to go?
Yeah, I think you could look at kind of the functions of them that differ, and I'll just use like CJC and tesamorelin as an example. So tesamorelin was used in HIV patients. What they observed was that it actually reduced visceral fat, right? And so the deep stomach fat that they were able to reduce. And so you look at something like CJC 1295, and while you might lose inches around your waist, it wasn't necessarily, it's not known for doing that to the same extent, right?
Okay.
Or Samorelin in terms of, how effective it is. And sometimes too, it might be a half-life thing, right? About how often you would have to take something to get the effects. There's certain things that might be a 2-time, 3-time a day thing. And there's certain things that might be a 1-time a day thing. And so I think there's a few things to look at with maybe what makes the most sense of the frequency of use, because you want to take them in a fasted state and this and that. So, but I think looking at truly what are all the effects that come along with CJC, and do you want to strictly put on, like MK677 is a really good one because of how different it is. That one, people are going to put on a lot of weight. They're going to retain a lot of water, right? And they, you're not going to have those, and they're going to get really, really hungry. You're not going to have effects to that extent with CJC 1295, right? And so I think when people are evaluating, well, what's the right thing for me? Is it tesamorelin? Is it CJC? And ipamorelin too is one that I would stack personally with tesamorelin, CJC. Anytime I would stack it, because you're stacking something that operates a little bit differently with how it triggers those things. And so it can be taken in conjunction with to increase and maximize the effects of what they're doing. Taking CJC and tesamorelin, because they're operating through the exact same ways, is going to basically be a waste, because they're right. It's like, would you take, bad example, but would you take Wegovy and Ozempic together to get maximum
or
benefit?
even Wegovy and TERS, because they are both GLP-1. So it's like, why just take,
Yeah. But if you had, if you had a GLP-1 agonist and then you had a GIP agonist, you could take those together to maximize the effects, even though those both kind of trigger similar things in the body, right?
Yeah,
Similar
like
concept.
CagriSema, or So then, okay, and I'm just getting sciencey here. I'm trying to understand. So you have these like Samorelin, tesamorelin, CJ, which release growth hormone from your pituitary gland, right? But obviously they do more than that if there's, right? It's not like they're just doing that and that's it for
Well,
them to have different effects. Like I'm just trying to figure out how are they, is it going at it, I explain.
yeah,
I
I
don't even
think
know how
so.
to
Like,
ask it.
for example, with tesamorelin, I mean, the amount of stimulation of lipolysis that's happening in the body, right?
Okay.
So we'll stem to this to kind of explain it. There is something called AOD 9604.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very, very popular one because AOD 9604, in the simplest way to explain it, is basically a modified version of the fragment of growth hormone that they identified was responsible for burning fat, right? And so that's sole purpose essentially is to trigger lipolysis, which is burning fat essentially.
Okay.
And so when you look at maybe how something is structured, because these things are all just short chains of amino acids,
Mm-hmm.
right? Depending on how they're structured, depending on what they're made up of, triggers different things in the body. And so it might trigger more lipolysis than another one.
Okay.
And a lot of times too, like the growth hormone will help with fat burning by increasing muscle growth, right? Where you have more muscle, which can increase metabolic rate, which can decrease fat, things along those lines. And so they're going to operate a little bit differently, and it's really just going to be how they're structured and where those things are. Like, for example, retatrutide versus tirzepatide, right? Still has GLP and GIP, but people don't feel as full on it.
Yeah.
Why? Because of the strength or the amount of action that those have on those receptors. And so in that sense, it's kind of a similar concept, right? It might target and operate a little bit differently on some of those things to create those desired results.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you mentioned how IPA you would stack with any, obviously that's doing something slightly different. So that's kind of what got my
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, that's really all I have. What do you want to wrap up with? Like, if you wanted to share some things with your viewers, what would it be, Hacky? What would it be?
What would it be? Go follow I mean, no. I think, well, one, I would love for everybody to support my book when it comes out. I'll start with that. And I never tell anybody to buy a single thing that I'm associated with, but I would tell people to buy the book because I do think that it's going to be able to help answer a lot of questions and be a very, very good resource. People always ask me, where can I go as a one-stop shop to find all the information I need to know about peptides? And
Yeah,
I'm like,
Hacky's book.
piece a bunch of stuff together because that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would hope that everybody would support that if they're interested in this type of information. The other thing too is that I would say is spend time learning what exists out there because there's a lot. Spend a little bit of time about it, and if you have something that you're curious about with your body, is there a more natural way to approach this? Is there something out there that exists that can help with this? I would say spend time looking into the peptides and seeing, do those things exist, because there's so much out there with them. There's so much information. And I tell people to watch this documentary on YouTube called Peptide Bioregulators documentary. It talks about the origin, it talks about the history. And to me, that's super eye-opening when you're looking at this. And the last piece that I would tell people is don't be so eager to find the best thing that exists. Because I get this question a lot. Well, what should I take? What peptides should I take? I don't know.
Yeah. What's
Right?
going on with you? Yeah.
Exactly. The only person that knows is you because you know what things you have wrong with your body. Like we said before, take it slow, focus on one thing at a time. But when you're looking at what is the best peptide out there, what is the thing that bothers you the most? Because that is going to be your best peptide. There
Yeah.
is none that's better than the other if it doesn't matter for you.
Yep. Awesome. Well, in the description below, guys, there's going to be links to all of Hacky's things, his Facebook group, his TikTok, wherever, whatever he wants to give me, I will link below. So be sure to go look him up and join all the things and follow him on TikTok. He's awesome on TikTok. He goes live all the time. You can ask him all the questions
All the
and
questions.
all the questions. And thanks. Yeah. Thanks for taking your time today. This has been awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. And thanks for inviting me on. And yeah, this was fun. I'm new into the interviewing and stuff like that. So this is really my first one. So
Well, let's do a book launch interview when it comes out. Seriously, that would be fun, and I'd love to help you get the word out.
what if we do a book reading interview where I read you the book for 37 hours, a nonstop?
Maybe not, but
Yeah.
still, no, then
Yeah.
we should do something. I think that
Awesome.
would
Yeah.
be awesome. So,
Thank you.
cool. All right. Have a good day.
You too.
That was the best interview ever. Okay, well, they're all good. I love every interview I do on here. Again, you can find all of Hacky's information down in the description. Find out where to find him on the Facebooks, on the TikToks, how to get his book, all of it. So definitely go check it all out and have a great day.